at here. So today we will be talking about Survey Says, results and conclusions, very interesting conclusions, from the first all-inclusive faculty survey on educational technology trends at NYU with an emphasis on the learning management system. One of the themes that you'll be seeing today is the amount of collaboration that happened across disciplines and departments to actually facilitate this survey. And one of those themes is emerging right now. So this is a collaborative presentation. So I work within IT. I am the service provider, so I get all the panicked emails on Saturdays from faculty saying, fix my course site. I also design and lead trainings with faculties. And we have Bob Splotchy here, who is a faculty member. Bob is the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at Liberal Studies, which is one of the schools at NYU. And also to help with this presentation, we had some help from another faculty member within Stern, Maya Georgieva, who is the Associate Director of Educational Technology at the Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning at Stern, which is our business school. All right, so why should we have a survey? The goal for having this survey was to have a better understanding of who our users are and what they're doing, why they're doing it, when they're doing it. And one of the main reasons to do something like this is to inform how do we continue to support and develop the learning management system. We recently transitioned to Sakai from Blackboard. It was roughly an 18-month transition. And one of our big points to our user base was that we're doing this so we can go to an open source platform, right? Which means that we now have the freedom and the flexibility to make changes when we want, when we need them. But the way to go about making those changes, I think, should really be driven by what users are doing and what they're thinking, rather than what we think in our little isolated, bubbles that can often happen within IT. Okay, so for the overview today, pretty basic structure. So the outline for today will be who, what, when, where, why, and the all-important how. So what are the learning moments that we had as a result of this survey? Okay, so why and when with regards to developing the survey. So at NYU, we have a governance structure that's placed around the learning management system that comes down from the Provost Office. So it starts off at the Provost Office and the Teaching and Technology Committee, which has direct interaction between the Provost Office. Then there's another group called the LMS Subcommittee, which really gives direction and guidance for more actionable items in terms of where they feel the learning management system should go and where feedback should be coming from. For anyone who attended the conference last year, we gave a more in-depth presentation on this structure. It was titled User Needs, and I think it's still on the Lanyard site from last year if you want to pull it up. So with this structure in mind, again, as the university transitioned from Blackboard to Sakai, that was approximately an 18-month-long process. And when we were finished with that transition, we sort of took a break and began to wonder, so what is everyone thinking now that we just changed these systems? Do they like using it? So the idea for the survey came out as a request from the LMS subcommittee directly to the user advisory group. So this is the group that Bob and I co-chair along with Maya. And the group is charged with a few goals. So what are the identifications of needs from faculty as a whole group? And how can we review feedback in a systemized way? And then how can we use that analysis of that feedback to make recommendations for development? So again, because we moved to this open source system, we really want to take advantage of that capability, but really in the smartest way possible. So this was an iterative feedback with a lot of iterative process with a lot of feedback. The survey development started in around October of 2013 with the deployment of the survey in April 2014. And during that time, the goals of the survey started to emerge. So we knew that we wanted to reflect the priorities of our users and an understanding not only how and why classes, which is what we call our instance of Sakai, is being used, but what needs is it currently meeting, and what needs is it currently not meeting. And so one of the issues in understanding user needs is you have to know who they are. And so, quick question for the group: what do you think this number represents? Yes.
Number of faculty members, full, part-time, across all the various classes.
Yes. So this is the number of faculty, according to HR, that work at NYU across all different contexts. So if they're full-time, part-time, adjunct. So this is our potential user base. This is huge. I know that we are a large institution. But even if it was just 800 faculty, that's still a substantial number. So why is it that we're having such a hard time knowing who these faculty are? Another unique factor about NYU is not only the size of the university, but where we're located. So we are a global network university. NYU has 3 portal campuses, and what a portal campus means is that you could start out at NYU as a freshman within any of those locations. So we have a portal site in New York, a portal site in Abu Dhabi, and a portal site in Shanghai. Once you enter the Global Network University, you could then hop around if you want. We have 11 international academic centers located around the globe, and I think those are the red dots. And then the small green dots, there are just a few of those. Those are study away sites that will sponsor NYU students to visit those programs. So the green dots really don't represent NYU faculty, but the blue and the red dots do. And so with this wide range of users, we all know that they're using NYU Classes. When we rolled out Sakai, it was a replacement for primarily Blackboard, but also to streamline and get everyone on one primary learning management system. So we have all these faculty all over the world now engaging in teaching and learning, hopefully in new ways or better ways through one system. So the survey focus started to solidify a little bit more, and we really wanted to focus on educational technology trends. Again, what happens within the learning management space and what happens outside of that space, why people choose to use it, why people choose not to use it. And so these were some of our research questions that started to solidify. So who exactly is the user? What do they do or perceive themselves as doing within NYU Classes? What do they care about doing both within the learning management system and outside the learning management system? And even more with that, why do they care about perhaps integrating so many tools within their classroom? What's going on there? And then finally, how satisfied is the user with NYU Classes? Okay, so who is the NYU Classes user? So about 91% of the survey respondents answered that they log in at least once or twice a week. Graduate level instructors seem to represent the highest single type of instructor. I thought this was interesting. This is very interesting to me. So 8% of the uses within courses that identifies that they teach about 50 to 100 students at the same time. And if you think about some of the tools that are incorporated into a learning management system, right, and because some people think the emphasis is on the management part, it seems that for courses that could potentially have a larger need for management-based tools to help deal with all of their students, they're not really using the LMS to help them with that. So then this raises the question, what are they doing to help them to manage, courses of this size? 76% of the faculty respondents set up and manage their course sites completely on their own, which was great to hear, especially from my position being in a support capacity. Whereas 2% of the same population rely on TAs or course assistants to do everything for them. So we seem to have a group of faculty that are logging in, quite a bit into the system, and they're able to set things up on their own. Okay, so now we know a little bit about who they are, right? We know some of their habits, how often they're logging in, how large their classes are. So the next question that I, start to think is, well, what are they teaching? And will any trends emerge or any disciplines really be at the front runner of what type of faculty member uses an LMS? I'm interested to hear what some of you think, if you have any theories. So do you think it would be primarily show up more within humanities-based courses, science-based courses, recitations, labs? Do you think it matters? I saw one person say no. Anyone say yes?
Science-based courses.
So you think there would be more use in science-based courses? Interesting. So I have one for science, one for no. Humanities, okay. So this is actually some data from the survey. So the question was, the courses I teach fall primarily into this broad disciplinary area. Now this is a graph that represents the percentage breakdowns of responses. So I know it's a little hard to see, but the highest response of a single discipline was only at 24%, and that was within the humanities. So across all of the faculty that answered this survey, it seems to me, my interpretation is that not one discipline truly comes out within the majority of a type of faculty member that would lean towards using a learning management system. Just to note, clocking in at around 14% is people that replied, I teach something totally different, so I need a little box to tell you what that is. When we were going through those responses, a lot of those answers could have actually fit into some of these predefined categories. So the next part of our analysis, which will be happening after the conference, is trying to put those others back into these broad areas and see if that really changes the trend at all. But I thought this was very interesting. So following up after humanities, it was the social sciences, followed by business, then this other thing, which should hopefully go away soon. Sciences, and then fine arts, and then following up with math and education. Okay. So separate but related. So we wanted to find out if you're not using NYU Classes, if you're not using a learning management system to support your teaching and learning, tell us why you're not using it. And so what this graph represents, so I should probably back up a little bit. The number of faculty that we know to use the learning management system hovers at around 4,500 at the university. The number of responses that we collected from the survey was roughly over 1,000. This population that replied no to not using an LMS at all was around 100. So about 10% of the total respondents do not use a learning management system within their course. And so some of the reasons why they're not using it, so if you look at the light blue, about 80% of this population, so population of around 100, felt that not using NYU Classes is not related to either being uncomfortable with technology or not believing that technology does not enhance their education, which I think is good, right? So they're not thinking negatively about technology. They're not thinking the computer will take over my classroom in that sense. They're just not choosing to use it. If you look at the dark blue, so this one, that color represents the determining factor. So there was some minor significance, around 30%, that this population felt that classes did not meet their needs, and that's why they weren't using it, or they prefer to use other platforms instead of the learning management system. So any questions about this data? I see some confused. Yeah.
When you ask about using NYU classes, does that mean using recorded content, using content used by other NYU faculty members? I'm not sure I understand using NYU classes versus other choices.
Sure. So NYU Classes is the branded name for our instance of Sakai. So essentially we're just asking faculty, do you use a course site for your teaching? We'll get a little bit deeper into why they're using it, but some of the few of the slides coming up next. For what purposes are you using it for? Okay. This was very interesting to me. So the next question, the next research question that emerged, so what does the user do or perceives themselves as doing within NYU Classes or within a course site learning management system? So who wants to take a guess on how many faculty would say that they are doing neat, cool stuff in educational technology? So they're flipping, they're blending, they're encouraging collaboration, they're going crazy. Small, right? Small, no craziness happening, right? So that's exactly what we found. So we found that, and this is very interesting to me, so only 6% of the total population self-identified as having a blended, hybrid, and or fully online course. Now, the interesting part to me as an instructional designer is that we tend to be very nitpicky on how we define these terms, especially around blended and hybrid. And I would make the argument that even if you're using a course site for document management or deploying online tests, you're still blending technology into your course. So if we know that we have from our service metrics, right? If we know that we have over 4,500 faculty using the LMS every day, but only 6% of those faculty self-identify as doing something that would fall into blended or hybrid, to me that signifies a need for professional development within faculty to have them realize what these definitions are, and also that they are doing it already. That's not this big scary, approach that they need to tackle. Okay. So in line with that 6% statistic before on the question of, are you doing cool fancy things in your LMS? The next question that we asked faculty was, for what purposes do you use NYU Classes? Check all that apply. And probably, you don't even probably need to see what the bottom tags are. So you probably guess the top part of the graph are related to posting a syllabus, sharing files, posting announcements, and getting a roster. And none of those to me speak to blending or having a hybrid approach truly in your course. So now Bob's going to come up and talk about the next part of the survey.
Thank you. So we also wanted to find out what users cared about doing in and outside of classes, what they wanted to do inside and outside of Sakai, what was most important to them in that respect. There was both a direct approach. We asked them what were the most important functionalities that they use in NYU Classes and limited each respondent to 3 responses. So they wouldn't just say everything, but would make some choices. And also asking them what kind of functionalities they wanted to see that were not currently provided in NYU Classes. The most important uses for classes, the 2 lines, 2 bars at the bottom, which you can see far outstripped any others, were the basic functionalities to share a syllabus document and to share a file, to post a syllabus document rather, and to share files. just to document the syllabus, not anything fancy using the syllabus tool. The third one underneath that, there are two bars that are redundant. As many people, as long as that iterative process was that Francesca described earlier, as many people looked at this survey, we still had to somehow manage to include both post an announcement and make an announcement as options in answering the survey. And there were a few people who sort of plaintively asked in the comments at the end, what's the difference between posting an announcement and making an announcement? And there is none. It was just a mistake. But that was the third highest use that people identified. Not just that they do the most, but that's most important to them. Way down at the bottom were things like administering surveys. Even running discussions weren't as high as you might have imagined. The syllabus creation tool was quite far down towards the bottom as well. The next slide, we asked people what functionalities that were not currently available in NYU classes they would most like to see made available. We need a jumbotron in here really so that you could be able to read these. But the two top areas were I can't even read them. Tools for advanced student collaboration and expanded administrative tools. So sort of the two, that tension that we keep finding in defining an LMS was evident here between the people who wanted to allow students to do more in collaboration with each other, with the instructor, and those who wanted the instructor to have more powers within the system. The third highest response was other, and that's interesting. Talk about that more later. The bottom two were adaptive learning and analytics. That's, I find, very interesting because it seems to me that instructors think that they can handle the analytics and the adaptive learning part, that they don't need the system to tell them what students are doing well or not doing well. There were also quite strong responses in the social reading and e-portfolio areas as well. Move on to asking then how satisfied the user is with classes. There were both direct and indirect measures of that. We asked straight out, how satisfied are you with the system? We also asked about satisfaction with each of the individual tools. But some of the most revealing data in the survey comes from an analysis of the discrepancies in the responses of people who identified themselves as satisfied and dissatisfied to other questions entirely, questions that did not directly ask about their level of satisfaction. Here's the overall satisfaction level. The dark green, the big red, and the darker blue, these three pieces of the pie represent, God, I'm just as loud without the microphone, represent the satisfied users, somewhat satisfied, satisfied, very satisfied. These are the dissatisfied users, somewhat dissatisfied, dissatisfied, and very dissatisfied. Purple is neutral. Basically, satisfied users outnumbered dissatisfied users by about 3 to 1, and there was happily a relatively small number of people who were simply indifferent. Only about 9% of the overall total said, I'm neither satisfied nor dissatisfied. So I want to click through some of the minor discrepancies between the satisfied and dissatisfied users and some ways in which their sort of user profiles were quite similar to each other. The amount of use did not differ significantly. It's not as if people who were dissatisfied were turning off and not using the tool at all after that. Their disciplinary areas showed no significant differences. Their class sizes showed no significant differences. It's not as if people doing large classes were disenchanted and people doing small classes were happy. And the main purposes of use were very similar as well. That list of what did you find the 3 most important functions, there wasn't a large discrepancy between what satisfied and dissatisfied users said. The dissatisfied users did skew slightly towards discussion-based classes. There were the largest number of both areas said, my class is a mix of lecture and discussion, but the balance was about opposite in the pure discussion versus pure lecture, where for the dissatisfied instructors, about 20% of them said they were doing a purely discussion-based class, about 15% pure lecture-based class. For the satisfied users, it was the opposite, about 14% said they were doing a discussion-based class, about 22% a lecture-based class. The dissatisfied users did track somewhat older, or at least they had been teaching at NYU longer than satisfied users. That might also explain why they were doing more lecture-based classes. The longer you've been teaching, the more chance you normally get to teach upper-level seminars and to have fewer students in your classes. People who are newer in the system might tend to be assigned to larger classes. It wasn't a huge difference among the dissatisfied users. 39% of them reported having 10 or fewer years teaching experience. Among satisfied users, it was 48%. So about a little bit less than a 10% difference there. The dissatisfied users, in the squeaky wheel gets the grease mode that one would expect, sought and got somewhat more assistance in using NYU classes than satisfied users. A user who was satisfied also tended to need or ask for less help than a user who was not dissatisfied. Again, a fairly small percentage, may not be meaningful, could be random, 27% to 21%. Also a difference that's not huge, but perhaps of some significance, of the respondents who identify themselves as dissatisfied, 11% fewer of them saw or identified file sharing as one of their most important uses for the system. Otherwise, the discrepancies were very, very minor in what people identified as the most important use, but there was that one. Then we asked people to rate their satisfaction with particular tools. And the further you get towards the center with the purple line, the more dissatisfied people were. So the greatest level of dissatisfaction, almost 50% of the users reported being dissatisfied in some way. The green is neutral, the red and the blue are satisfied. Any guesses? It was keeping a gradebook. Keeping a gradebook was the thing that the highest percentage of users reported as their pain point in using Sakai CLE-based NYU classes. The next lowest was other, interestingly enough, and that was a very wide range of things, mostly either the system's too slow or I don't like the way the email function works, things along those lines. We'll be talking more about the other categories as we go along. And then some of the more sophisticated functions tended to generate more dissatisfaction. Running discussions had an almost 30% dissatisfaction rate. Administering tests was a little over 30%. The ones that had the functionalities that had the greatest discussion were the meat and potatoes functions. Things like posting a syllabus document, which had an over 80, almost 85% satisfaction rate, and most of the rest were neutral. Posting announcements, also 80+% satisfaction rate. This is a chart that breaks all of that down in numerical form. What's interesting are both the numbers and the number of respondents who mentioned or filled in their dissatisfaction, didn't see this as not applicable to them. So anything below 3, basically, there were more people satisfied than dissatisfied. Anything above 3, there were more dissatisfied than satisfied. And the line is there. So the 3 areas in which there were more dissatisfied than satisfied people were building a module in Lesson Builder, Other, and keeping a gradebook. Now, the big discrepancy, however, is in numbers. 414 people responded about keeping a gradebook, and most of them, the majority of them, were negative. For Other, it was only 81 responses, Lesson Builder, only 102. There were also a fairly large number of people, 260, who responded to running a discussion, and that was barely on the positive side. The largest number of responses were posting a syllabus document, posting announcements, making announcements. Those were all well up over 600 and also had quite high satisfaction rates. Same chart looking at satisfied users only, then dissatisfied only. The order is pretty similar. It's not as if the satisfied users were seeing individual tools in a totally different way than the dissatisfied users. So what that seems to suggest is that an overall sense of satisfaction or dissatisfaction translated itself in people's responses to every single individual tool. Even gradebook, for people who are satisfied with the system as a whole, their gradebook was the thing they were least satisfied with, but they were still satisfied with on majority. On a 1 to 5 scale, with 3 being neutral, it was a 2.78. 1 would be the best and 5 the worst. So if somebody was satisfied with the system, on balance, let me put it this way, on balance, users who were satisfied with the system were satisfied to some extent with every single tool in the system. Sorry. Users who were dissatisfied with the system were dissatisfied with almost every single tool in the system. Only the 4 functionalities of posting a syllabus document, or 3 functionalities, since making and posting announcements are the same one, and getting my roster, those are the only ones that had a, on balance, positive satisfaction from the dissatisfied, from the users who were dissatisfied overall. Every single other tool had a negative response. That would suggest to me that people aren't so much responding to the tool, but responding to the system in a way that colors their response to the tool. We're not good on time, are we? Oh no, we have till 4. I'm sorry. Yeah. I thought when some sessions start on the hour and some that start a quarter of the hour after the hour, and your brain's as old as mine is, it can be very confusing.
You have 12 minutes.
Thank you. This is the most fascinating discrepancy of all. We asked what functionalities not currently in NYU classes you would most like to see available. I showed you the overall response to that earlier. This is the response from satisfied users. Other is way down here, below annotation tools for images, tools for advanced course management, portfolio tools, web conferencing tools, social reading tools, 3rd highest among that group, expanded administrative tools, and tools for enhanced student collaboration. On the other hand, get my workout here. For dissatisfied users, the top 2 were tools as tools for enhanced student collaboration and expanded administrative tools, but other was the third highest response. The rest of the responses below that were somewhat similar to those for satisfied users. For both groups, adaptive learning and analytics tools were at the bottom. So what was going on with that hugely different response for other when we asked them what other functionalities you wanted to see? Only 16% of the satisfied users said other, 37% of the dissatisfied users, more than twice as many, checked that box. What were they talking about? Well, we looked at the qualitative responses since they were asked to explain. Most of the or a large number of the satisfied users, at least, said none. I don't want to see any other additional functionalities. In both groups, people mentioned specific tools, they mentioned gradebooks, but of the dissatisfied users, more than a third of them said, I just want it to work right. I just want the basic functionalities. Only 3 out of 85 of the satisfied users said anything along those lines. So the dissatisfied users were recording their dissatisfaction with how hard it was to use things in the system. The satisfied users were not. A little bit more on building up that general picture of the satisfied and the dissatisfied user as we go along, but it's starting to suggest that the dissatisfied users were using NYU Classes to provide their basic functionalities and didn't really want to use a lot of other platforms. People who wanted to use other platforms in larger numbers were also more satisfied with NYU Classes. Similar kind of thing happened when we asked people what other platforms besides NYU Classes do you use in teaching. Now these are platforms that are provided at the university. Top responses were Google Drive and Google Docs, then other, and below that Google Sites, WordPress, and Blogger, bringing up the dusty rear. What's interesting here is, again, in the other box, where we looked at the responses, the people who were satisfied with the system mentioned 30 different platforms outside of Google Apps, a total of 64 times that they were using in addition to NYU Classes. The dissatisfied users mentioned only 13 other platforms, for a total of only 19 other times. For the dissatisfied users, the most common response to what other platforms besides NYU Classes to use in teaching when they checked other was none. Out of the 43 responses, nearly a quarter of them, in fact, a little over a quarter of them said, I don't use anything other than NYU Classes, and that's why they picked none. Only about 5 of them said Dropbox, compared to 21 who said Dropbox among the satisfied users. So 2/3 of the satisfied users mentioned some other platform outside of things that the university provides. Less than half, considerably less than half, only a little over 40% of the dissatisfied users did so. So that again is contributing to the picture of the person who's dissatisfied with NYU Classes as being the person who expects it to do everything and doesn't want to go outside for any other kinds of functionalities. That brings us to our lessons learned, and shall I go first and then bring Francesca? And so for me, the back to basics dissatisfied users just make the regular functionalities work versus the satisfied users who want even more, who want more different platforms available to them, who want social reading tools to a much higher percentage. shows that there's a real tension that we need to negotiate between delivering the basics and creating a system that will make it easier for faculty members to incorporate innovative best practices into their teaching. And maybe the LMS is not the best place to build the innovative tools. The people who expect to find that in the LMS tend, on average, to be a little bit less satisfied with it. Maybe they should be routed through the LMS rather than built directly in it.
And just to quickly follow up to that, so my two learning moments, one was around how the survey was designed. So as we were going through the data, a lot of the questions asked faculty to pick all of these that apply to you. And as we were going through the data, it probably would have been more meaningful to have faculty rank, especially once we parsed out the populations who's satisfied versus dissatisfied. We gathered a lot of good data, but a lot of our conclusions are on drawing correlations between what the data is suggesting rather than what we can really see the numbers indicating. And something else from this process, perhaps in our next all-faculty survey, to include more questions that will capture how confident they feel with using technology in their classroom. A lot of this, for me, comes from that 6% that I identified as using technology to teach a blended course. I really feel that faculty, that number should be much higher than 6%. So with that, that's the end. So does anyone have any questions?
And we'll post this to Lanyard. You may be able to see. It's up already, so you can see the charts a little bit better than you can here.
I wanted to know, based on the results that you got for the more satisfied faculty who did tend to go outside of some kind of functionality they need, are you building a list to try to bring any of that functionality in, or are you maybe looking for LTI integrations, or are they happy going outside and why muddle the waters? Like, if they're happy in the way they're using it already.
Well, right now we haven't done anything. The survey is still being analyzed by professional data analysts, and I would hope that we would gather a list of the outside platforms that people are using and see how we can best deliver that kind of functionality, whether it's through simply continuing to encourage people to use outside platforms or to find some equivalent.
But I think the Sakai community's attention towards LTI and really making the platform LTI compatible for 10 and 11 and so on kind of speaks to that. So it resonates with the pattern that we saw with faculty wanting to create a hub rather than a monolithic platform so that people can kind of flow in and out, and the learning management system is really that starting point. Yes.
Have you already published paper, or do you plan to publish paper on this?
We don't know yet. I guess maybe.
It's going to be presented after.
Yeah. So the analysis that Bob and I presented is actually a very rough take at the data. There is a ton of data to go through. So we're collaborating with the research group. I would also recommend, if anyone does want to do an all-faculty survey, get some professional help in analyzing. Right, professional help before, during, and after. Different types of, but yeah. Definitely have a data analyst expert on your team, if possible. Just to help you make sure, one, that you're designing it the right way, because again, once we brought it to that group, they really outlined some questions that we just could have, asked a little bit better or formatted a little bit better to get better data. But we will be presenting this internally and maybe broader after that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll share it with the community.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I wanted to connect a couple of points that they quoted. I noted, Fran, you said that perhaps the faculty needed more professional development. And I was interested in Bob's presentation of the results. It showed adaptive learning and analytics, held in such good regard. And it strikes me that perhaps there's a disconnect between the IT folks, that they value those two technologies more highly than faculty.
Yes.
And I wonder, feel that that may be an opportunity for faculty development, or perhaps there's just too much hype associated with adaptive learning.
Well, I mean, I think there are a couple of factors here, and unfortunately, one of them is that in the academy, by and large, at least at large research institutions like ours, teaching doesn't get a lot of credit. So there are a large number of faculty members who want to do what they are most familiar with, and that involves the least rethinking with all of the time that implies about their pedagogical methods, and that we would need to find a way to have an incentive to credential that work so that instructors would feel rewarded and that it was something that the institution valued and not just something they were doing on their own initiative.
Is it fair to say that perhaps the two of you regard those technologies to be more important than you might have been rated in the survey?
With respect to adaptive learning and learning analytics? I think it depends on the role that an instructor sees technology playing within their classroom, and I think that tone was really represented in how faculty answered this survey, that they really view technology right now as kind of this asset, but that's on the side, and they're really the ones in center stage, kind of controlling everything. And when you think about adaptive learning or learning analytics, you really are relying on the technology to help you as an instructor formulate your own understanding of what your students are doing and how well they're doing it. And that seems to be a big jump from someone that's comfortable using a syllabus to now saying, go build out some adaptive learning paths. I think it needs to be more of a progression in becoming comfortable and fluent in the technology, as well as understanding why I should do something in addition to how I should do it. So not only to understand the mechanics of posting a syllabus, but why should I use my course site and then make it a dynamic syllabus, right? And bring different resources in, all living within the central page.
I think, too, that the rhetoric around adaptive learning and analytics has been unfortunate, mostly coming from administrative bodies. I don't think coming from educational technologists. But it's given faculty the impression that it's meant to replace some of the things that they do, rather than it being a tool for them, that it's a tool for administrations to use to save money through guiding a student's learning without as much classroom instruction and without as many classroom instructors. So I think that the whole way that adaptive learning and analytics is pitched needs to make clear to instructors that it can be something very useful for them and something that they can be informed by, but that is not going to mechanize what they do in some way.